I went, woo!
That's great, yeah.
So later on that day, he asked me to be in his band, and I stayed in his band for 2 years. I went to Europe for the first time with Miles, and it was a great experience. After 2 years, I was like, you know, Miles, I know you're not going to believe it, but I'm going to quit your band because I want to develop more as a musician, not just a bass player. I want to learn to write and compose and produce music, and I need to get out of the band. And I knew, you know, he was going to be upset, but I was wrong. He wasn't upset. He said, you know what, I understand. You're very talented, and I want you to grow as much as you can. If you ever need me, you let me know. To anybody who knows Miles Davis, that was an amazing thing for him to say.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. So I went and did my thing. I was working with Aretha and Luther Vandross and David Sanborn. I was producing and doing my thing. And a couple of years later, I called Miles back, and I said, listen, man, I've been writing music, and I have some stuff for you. And he said, well, bring it on. And I flew out to California. And to make a long story short, that was Tutu. I recorded this song. I wrote this song for him called Tutu, that 1980, 85, 86. And it began my second relationship with him, but this time as a writer, I had more kind of input into his music. I was telling him what to play. That's a trip.
Yeah, I bet.
The first time, you know, we were overdubbing, and I said, you know, I can't tell him what to do, so I just stood there and watched him. And he was doodling. He said, when are you going to tell me what to play? And I said, okay. So I brought my little horn with me, and I would just play the melodies to him, and he would take my cue. And it got very comfortable, and we ended up having a very nice relationship. We did 3 albums. We did movie scores. It was very nice. So anyway, that's my experience with Miles, and I think the reason that Miles and I got along so well is that I was younger, but I knew his entire history, you know.
Right.
I knew not just what he had done last 10 years. I knew from 1945 all the way through. So when he started talking about J.J. Johnson and Bird and them, I was like, yeah, J.J. used to wear his pants up high, didn't he, Miles? You know, he did, Marcus. He used to wear his pants up like this, man. I had all the details, you know. So we got along really well. So I got a chance to see how this guy thinks, you know. And what was beautiful about him was that he was just such an honest, natural musician. The stuff that he did that's so special to us, you know, it just flowed out of him. It wasn't like he sat and said, what am I going to do to blow these people's minds, you know? He just, you know, I'm tired of doing this, I'm going to do that.
You know, he seemed to be like one of those cats that he's always the innovator. He's always the one that's thinking ahead and creating, and everybody looks to him for that creation. He just seems to naturally have been the guy to do that.
Absolutely. And also, you know, he angered a lot of people, because people would fall in love with what he was doing,
yeah,
and then he'd switch because he hated being kind of doing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, he's done with that. He's ready to move on.
But people got so mad because people fell so in love with what he was doing. For instance, in the 50s, people fell in love with what he was doing so much that when he switched in the 60s, it angered them. Yeah. It made them feel abandoned. It made them feel like maybe he didn't think that they were worth continuing for, you know what I mean? I saw it because he changed in the 60s, so the 50s fans were upset. Then he really changed in the 70s, and the 60s fans were really mad at him, you know? And then he changed again in the 80s. I actually helped him change in the 80s, so I got to see the reaction. I got to see the people. People would write in and say, man, you're the devil. You know what I mean? It was so, you have no idea what he was getting. And what I learned from him, when I say he was honest, what I mean by that is, people were criticizing him left and right, but it never changed his need to continue to change.
Well, that's almost kind of hard to do, because as an artist, you know, artists are people too, and when you see these things written about you, they're written about you. Now, maybe as a mass audience reads it, then it's like, oh, whatever, it can be, you know, all floaty. But when it's you, it's like everything you read with your name attached to it is personal to you, and that affects you. And for somebody to not let it affect them and keep changing styles like that has to be, you know, incredible strength.
And, you know, a lot of people who kind of read these stories about Miles, he was very rough and he had a really gruff exterior, but he was a very, very sensitive human being. And you got to know that from hearing the way he played those ballads, that there's only so hard he could be, because that sensitivity came through his music so clearly, you know. So I watched him take all the criticism, but still feel the need to continue to change and continue to develop. So we're going to get to Kind of Blue now, because this album, like we talked about, happened in 1959. I think the first sessions were in February.
And So one of the big problems that Miles had with me was that I would take the tape recorder, and I remember specifically this time that I would carry the tape recorder on stage, and I would take my little microphones, 2 small microphones, because it was stereo, crawl under the piano and set the microphones up. But usually at about that time, and in Stuttgart this particular time, Miles counted off the tempo with his foot. It was like 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, I was still under the piano. I was supposed to start, and I was still under the piano. Miles looked up and went, ah. So he had to start it again. Now, finally we started and everything was fine. And I remember that we were playing So What, one of Miles's compositions from the late 50s, I guess. And Tony Williams was playing drums, Ron Carter bass, Wayne Shorter saxophone, and it was a really hot night. The music was tight. It was powerful. It was innovative and fun. We were having a lot of fun, and the music was on. Tony Williams was burning on his drums, and so right in the middle of Miles's solo, when he was playing one of his amazing solos, and I'm trying, I'm in there and I'm playing. Right in the middle of his solo, I played the wrong chord, a chord that it just sounded completely wrong. It sounded like a big mistake. And I did this and I went, oh, like this. I put my hands around my ears. And Miles paused for a second. And then he played some notes that made my chord right. He made it correct, which astounded me. I couldn't believe what I heard. Miles was able to make something that was wrong into something that was right, with the power of the choice of notes that he made and the feeling that he had. And so I couldn't play for for about a minute. I couldn't even touch the piano. But what I realize now is that Miles didn't hear it as a mistake. He heard it as something that happened, just an event. And so that was part of the reality of what was happening at that moment. And he dealt with it. He found something that, since he didn't hear it as a mistake, he felt it was his responsibility to find something that fit. And he was able to do that. That taught me a very big lesson about not only music, but about life. We can look for the world to be as we would like it to be as individuals, make it easy for me, that idea. We can look for that. But I think the important thing is that we grow. And the only way we can grow is to have a mind that's open enough to be able to accept situations, to be able to experience situations as they are and turn them into medicine, turn poison into medicine. Take whatever situation you have and make something constructive happen with it. That's what I learned from that situation with Miles.